Okay,
Yeah.
we are here. That is Mike Pesca. I am Chris Cilliza. We did Mike. When did we do? A couple weeks ago, we did a
I
Substack Live.
think it was a
That
fortnight, though. I
yeah.
invented this term called an antwentig, which means 21 in Old English. So it might have been an antwentig
Oh,
ago.
I think it was an Antoine take. You know, the only reason I know what fortnight means is because when I was a kid, I was really into tennis, and the majors in tennis, Wimbledon, French Open, are 2 weeks long, right? Most
Yeah.
tournaments are a
Yeah.
week. And so there'd always be like a fortnight at Wimbledon. And I was always like, what the hell is that? And I eventually figured out it's 2 weeks. So Mike and I did this, and Antwentin. Did I say that right?
Antwentig. It's the Old English for
Antwin.
21.
Hey,
And
okay.
Antwentig. Yes.
Okay. So 20-ish, 21 days ago. And we liked it so much. We both enjoyed it so much. We thought, well, what the hell? Let's do it regularly. So that's what you're getting.
Right.
Um, uh, so we're gonna do it pretty regularly. So if you don't follow Mike already, you need to. If you don't follow me, I hope you take the advantage of this. All right, so Mike, we're gonna talk a bunch of things. Let's start with I was just watching Caroline Levitt, the White House press secretary, and she
To learn a lot.
was I did. It was very informative. Um, she was asked about this Steve Bannon comment about using ICE to patrol, I don't know what the right word is, polling places in the midterms. And she said, well, Donald Trump's not going to do anything like that. But I want to talk to you about that because this is all of a piece with Trump saying, both to members of Congress and in an interview, saying we should nationalize the election. And he doesn't mean like make it on national issues. He means take control of it, because these 15 states are so corrupt. You have
They should
that.
nationalize it if the issue was affordability. Yes, that
Right,
actually they
exactly.
should, but
Totally.
he's uninterested in that. Yeah.
So you have that, then you have Bannon, and now and Trump has tried to say, well, I didn't mean that. I meant pass the SAVE Act, which is a voter ID thing that's sitting in the Senate right now. Give me your take, because I know you went deep on like the full Bannon. You never go full Bannon. No, the full Bannon comment on this. So give me your take on that, because Bannon tends, I think, Bannon kind of runs interference sometimes on the tip of the spear for Trump, like testing
Yes.
stuff out
Yes.
because he can say
Yes.
anything. Give me your take on it.
So between the two of us, we each have a shirt and then an undershirt under it. So that's about 4. So that's the full Bannon,
Bannon,
I think.
I have a
Yeah.
jacket I could put on so I could go 3 layers. It's not all
And
black though. This is
I've not
blue.
shaved in a while. I can't say that my hot tub has acid in it, which is the really full Bannon. But anyway, okay. So even to go back a little bit, this was an example of I just think Trump riffing / bullshitting, asked by Dan Bongino in Dan Bongino's triumphant return show, and he wasn't even asked a question. Bongino just bragged a little bit about some initiative that he had at the FBI.
Yep.
And then it was Trump's turn to talk. And he went on for 6 minutes. And I played a condensed-ish version on my show just to give the listeners an impression of where this proposal really came from. And it came from, he would say we've, but first he started talking about Minnesota immigrants, and then he started talking about, and we'll never win another election, and there should be election security, and I had the biggest, I had a wave election, but they took it away from me. And then he said, Republicans are stupid about this. They should, and these are the phrases that got repeated, they should nationalize the election. At least 15 states can't be trusted. And he talked a little bit about Georgia. He had no plan to say any of this. It was free-floating grievance. And then he was on to a ranking of the presidents, and we did better in Venezuela than Carter did. I think he was talking about his attempted rescue of the hostages. All right. If you didn't know to get upset about this, I think everyone could have just ignored it. But I don't fault anyone for hearing a president say this. And maybe I'm sure the president doesn't know that it's actually unconstitutional to nationalize the election. People rightly said this would be a gigantic change. People like you said, and I saw your morning video, not only would be gigantic, it is never going to happen.
No.
Congress doesn't change the Constitution. And I don't know if you made this point on my show. I said, and the last thing elected officials ever change are the very rules that got them elected. They're loath to ever change those rules.
It's like voting to raise their own pay. They know how politically fraught it is.
Yeah, they'll just kick it down the road. And a lot of retiring senators cast that vote.
Yep.
So, but the thing that happened with Bannon is so would it die? Is it only going to live because election watchers and, actual proponents of democracy raised the red flag on this? Maybe it would have, except then Bannon knows what his job is. And I really don't think it's coordinated. I just think he's a skilled practitioner of classic propagandistic arts. And what
Yes.
there is, and this actually happened with the Russian interference thing. There was no coordination, but you get a signal. You know what the signal is. You relay the signal. You're a relay station, and then it disseminates and goes wide. So this is exactly how it's going to play out. That Trump maybe meant it, didn't mean it, dictator for a day. There's enough people to get upset with that, and I don't fault them, and I'm going to even get into that in a second. And then Bannon and others say, actually, this is a good idea. And the, so-called intellectual journals of the right will say, well, this is why it's a good idea. And they might be clever enough to say, Democrats and liberals are hypocrites because when Jair Bolsonaro was trying to monkey with Brazilian elections, the Brazilians have this national system and they even have one judge. And so many liberals in America were cheering that clarity. That is true. You can make those points. Anyway, it'll become a news cycle. But then and I'd like to hear what you think about this. I am pretty sure how this is going to play out, which is that it's not going to affect elections, but not because Trump is benign or Trump won't try it or there's no reason why an ICE official near a polling booth will actually intimidate an actual voter. I mean, it shouldn't, but we know that things like that have an effect. I
Yep.
just think greatly underestimated, sorry I've gone on so long, but greatly
No.
underestimated is the counter mobilization effect. And it always happens that there are suppression effects, and then the people being suppressed, usually Democrats, make the point they're trying to take away your vote. People hear about this and they vote in
Yep.
ever greater numbers. And the interesting thing about it is, I am not faulting. I heard Robert Kagan on Fresh Air talking about the death of democracy, and this was a MS Now segment. Without that, there won't be the counter mobilization. So I say,
Yep.
good, take it as seriously as you can. Don't let it get you so depressed or so miserable that you check out of politics or think America is a failed state. But that's my analysis of what's
Yeah.
going on. The counter
I
mobilization will swamp whatever weird, meandering, half-assed mobilization there is, which there very well could be.
I think that's right, and I think it's a really good point. I have two general thoughts. Thought 1 is the people the people who think and this is very prevalent on the left and then on the very far MAGA right, that everything Trump says is carefully planned and plotted out, that it's all he's operating under a plan. He said the nationalized elections thing on purpose because he's trying to the Fulton County thing is tied to that. I have never seen any evidence that the dude is playing three-dimensional chess. Like, I just haven't. You know what I mean? Like, I remember after 2016, that was a big storyline. Oh, see, he was making moves at a level you guys couldn't figure out. I don't think that's true. So I always assume that you didn't say it this way, but my assumption always is he's just saying shit. I mean, I like
Yeah.
for like he just says stuff. And the other point I wanted to make is it reminds me that the evolution of this whole nationalize the election thing re- reminds me of how, and this speaks to how, even though its origins are probably just him saying shit, it can have real impacts. The origins of Doge. So, Doge, for people who don't remember, was basically like an Elon Musk troll move. Like, we should start the Department of Government Efficiency. Ha! It spells Doge, Dogecoin. And then then Trump was like, we should do that. And then it became like a real thing. And it was like, wait, but this was just like a trolly joke that Elon Musk made. But then it had real world consequences because hundreds of
Yes.
thousands of federal employees don't have jobs anymore. And by the way, they got rid of Doge. I mean, it was like a 9-month fever dream. But the point is like to what you're saying is it's not just because he doesn't have some broad strategic plan doesn't mean it can't matter.
Right.
And
He
and
often
I just
talks.
keep that in mind.
he often talks things into being or not being, or talks bad ideas into being. I don't think he would have tried to pursue getting Mexico to pay for the wall if he didn't say that once or twice at a rally, wasn't so even
Yep,
committed to that idea, got a huge reaction. So not only did it become a permanent piece of rhetoric, he really did spend diplomatic capital trying to get Mexico to pay for the wall. That's the most prominent example I could think of. But there are a lot of ideas where he will say something, it will get a reaction, or you can see in real time he says, "Oh yeah, that is a good idea. This thing I actually said." And
100%.
I can't think of a good example where that became some great policy. It's a cousin of I met a waitress and she said no tax on tips. And I guess that works for him. It's very popular. But the other thing about what you said, no grand strategy, you constantly find this in the discourse about, well, this distraction is meant to distract from the last
Oh,
distraction. And
everything's a
it's almost
distraction
never
from the
true.
Epstein files, Mike. Everything
Yeah.
I write that isn't about the Epstein files, people be like, "You fell for it." And I'm like, "Not
Mhm.
everything in the world is a distraction from the Epstein file." Go ahead. Sorry to
Yeah,
interrupt.
Belichick was not let into the Hall of Fame because of the Epstein files. Um,
You just don't see the whole picture.
yeah, Billie Eilish said that stuff about stolen land to distract you from but I also think that he does benefit from it. He might not know what he's doing, but he has a general
Yes.
sense of the more that is happening and the more that's chaotic. And so back to Bannon, flood the zone with shit. That does really work for him. I
Yep.
do think. I just want to also emphasize that this stuff that he's proposing, it is horrible. If you are listening to this and saying, Mike's pretty blasé about this, no, I'm just prognosticating what I think will happen. But for it to happen, people have to be a lot less blasé than I am. And I'm not blasé. I'm predicting how it will play out. But it does play out because very earnest defenders of democracy do take it seriously. Just like, what's another interesting angle to this? I was watching press conferences of Georgia officials, and they
Mhm.
were, and not even officials, Democrats, state level. And they were very upset that Tulsi et al. Went in and took the election
Yep.
material, and they just defended, these were all Democrats, they defended the system of voting in Georgia. Now, remember, this system of voting in Georgia, with their rules about drinks online and anything else you couldn't do, was such a national casus belli among liberals that it
Yep.
became the plot line of the last season of Curb Your Enthusiasm. Just meaning that a liberal guy in California thought this was such a big idea that he incorporated it into the plot. That would be Larry David. But because of counter mobilization, after all these attempts to, cause election chicanery, we do have two Democratic senators from
Yep.
Georgia. That's kind of interesting.
I I just wanna say one more thing that sticks in my craw. I don't know if people still say that, but one thing that I always come back to when Trump talks about fraud and election fraud in 2020. And Mike Johnson did this weirdly. He was like asked about Trump talking about nationalizing elections and fraud, and he's like, "Well, there were 3 congressional races where a whole lot of votes came in at the last minute." I was like, "Dude, that's how elections work. Like that's not evidence of fraud." Anyway, the thing that makes me insane. Okay, so Donald Trump says that in at least 8 states, 6 to 8 states in 2020, the election was stolen from him. And lots of members of Congress, lots of Republican members of Congress, over 100, and 7 or 8 U.S. senators voted to object to the results in Pennsylvania and one other state before January 6th, on January 6th, before the rioters broke in. If those results were fraudulent, then does that mean that there was only fraud in the presidential race, and those members of Congress who got elected in Georgia, or Republicans who got elected in Georgia or Pennsylvania, that was above board, but the presidential was fraudulent? Like, I just don't understand. Like, if the election was stolen and corrupt, then how are you fine with being like, well, I mean, my race I won fair and square, but the race we lost? Like, it doesn't make any sense. It makes me crazy.
Right. There are some elements to the claim that do not make sense, like the like the Sidney Powell endorsed theory that it was the Venezuelan who had pre-monkeyed with the machines.
Oh, yeah.
So again, not to monkey with the. Why wouldn't you? If the Venezuelans wanted the Democrats in, why wouldn't they? Like you said, make the Republicans who are elected to the Senate and the House hurt too. But then there was other monkeying. I think I don't want to get into the bamboo theory, but the Italian satellite theory. There is, in fact, quite a bit that doesn't make sense. I also think a thing that doesn't make sense is Donald Trump thinking this is a good issue for anyone other than his cult. And it does work for the cult because, the cult has to. I don't want to be too dismissive. There are many fans of Donald Trump who aren't in a cult. There are rational reasons to like the man. But this part, I do think, if you do earnestly believe that the election was stolen, not some watered down version of the claim like we need election integrity.
Right.
That's cult like
That's
behavior.
fine,
And what
but
it, yeah,
right.
and it reifies the cult into when you believe the stuff that's illogical. That really shows you as a true believer. But why does he think this is good for him electorally? Why does he think that increasing the salience of the issue helps at all with midterms? Because all the evidence I can see is the more past candidates, past Republicans, who to some extent have to play footsie with the stolen election theme. But the more they really, really believe it, the more they underperform their fellow
Yeah.
Republicans.
No, and it's not, and it's just not an issue that an election that ended 1900 days ago is just not something that the average low information swing voter is like, you know what? That guy says the 2020 election is stolen. I'm going to vote for them. That's a great vision for the future, right? Like it's just,
Yeah.
it doesn't make any sense. It's just his personal hobby horse and he can't get beyond it. All right. I don't want to spend too much time on it. I want to go to for me, the most personal, certainly, story of the week. And you and I think, are both very interested observers of the media, both the kind of independent media we're in and the legacy media. For people who were on another planet over the last 24 hours, the Washington Post laid off 300 people. That's more than a third of its editorial staff. They have about 800 reporters, or had about 800 reporters. They got rid of the entire sports section largely. They decimated the local news section. They decimated international. They got rid of their photographers. They got rid of their graphics people. Am I too look, I'm not above bashing a billionaire. Let me just make that clear. Like if the billionaire deserves it, fine. And I think Jeff Bezos does at some level deserve this because I was there when he bought the Post. I was working there. And, he said at the time it was amazing. He said all the right things. He was the richest man in the world. He was putting money behind even when I left in early 2017, it was still the good Jeff Bezos. So I get that the switch and, there's obviously political ramifications. He's kissing up to Trump, blah, blah, blah. I get all those things. At the same time, and I think he bears blame, at the same time, to put everything at the feet of him and Will Lewis, the publisher, feels to me like we are forgetting the last 20 years of what the Washington Post either swung and missed at or did, or more damningly, didn't even swing at. Right. I mean, I pointed this out, like, the Athletic was for sale. The New York Times bought it. Wirecutter was for sale. The New York Times bought it. Punchbowl didn't have to start, or even if it did, could have been bought. I was there when Politico was formed. The Post had the opportunity to keep Jim Van Dyke and John Harris and Mike Allen in house and do it. They didn't. So Jeff Bezos didn't do any of those things. Will Lewis didn't really do. I mean, maybe he could have bought Punchbowl, right? I mean, but well, what's your take when you see this? Because the thing I like about you is when people are like, "Why do you like Mike?" I always say he's unafraid to voice his honest opinion. Because I think a lot of people have been cowed
Yes.
into this very narrow tunnel of what's acceptable talk, and especially as it relates to the media. Barry Weiss is terrible. She's destroying media. Emma Tucker is good because she's at the Wall Street. Like it's like there's no independent thought. Give me your take when you saw, not like we didn't know this was going to happen. We knew it was happening. I don't know if we knew the depth. Give me your take on it.
Yeah, I was sad and I thought it was a shame. And I also think that the easiest thing in politics is to request that someone richer than you pay taxes. And the easiest thing in journalism is to request that a philanthropist lose more money on your paper, your entity. And he was losing a ton of money. He was losing a little bit of money for about 7 or 8 years. And then perhaps the Post was actually doing well in 21 and 22, but he was losing $100 million.
$100 million.
And there's
Yep.
just, yeah, there's just something about even a centibillionaire or a decicentibillionaire or whatever Bezos is. He can't abide that. He doesn't want to abide that. And then he also says, and for my return of negative 100 million, I certainly am not in good stead with the administration. I think that definitely went on. He
Hmm.
probably grafts onto this a theory of we need to tack the Post more to, or more, less away from wokeness or liberalism or some descriptions that probably fairly attend to a lot of the Post story. But it's very easy to say that Bezos is a coward and Bezos stabbed us in the back. And to some extent, he did. I
Hmm.
haven't watched the Melania documentary, but I
Right.
expect I saw that it's a Rorschach test, but sometimes the ink blot could look like an extremely scary dragon ready to bite you.
Right.
All right.
We know why
Yeah.
that thing was financed and why it was done. Let's not, we don't need to belabor it. Like, that movie is not, I know it
Yeah.
did better than most documentaries. Most documentaries
There
also
are,
don't have a $35 million advertising budget behind them.
yes. I think that there are some questions even now with the Post. I wanted to ask you. It surprised me. It doesn't surprise me they got rid of graphics and photography. There are wire services. You fill
Yep.
in with contractors. International news is unbelievably expensive and it's prestige, but I'm sure it doesn't add to the bottom
It
line,
doesn't.
nor does quite set. Right. Nor does covering city councils. That's the
Nope.
key of the journalist, but it's not exactly why people buy the paper. I did think people bought the paper when they had a really great style section. That was fantastic. I love that style section. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe just the quality of writing isn't even a driver. But I don't understand sports. Where are you going to go to for your Commanders coverage? And that team is crazy popular, and there's no one else covering it. Who's going to fill in as the dean of the Nationals or the Capitals beat?
Yeah. Look, my general view is nature abhors a vacuum. So someone will step into that void, right? Someone or something will step into that void. But for me, I'm glad you mentioned it because I'm I'm leery of saying all the blame goes to the billionaire. All the blame goes to Will Lewis. He's not even American. He's British. Yeah, the one place I do think that they made a giant mistake is getting rid of sports. Like you said, like international is a prestige play. Nobody reads international stories. I mean, like it's why Semaphore is an events business. Really, it's not really like a news organization because nobody. As much as people say, I want to read about what's going on in Kenya, I can guarantee you people do
Yes.
not read about what's
Yes.
going on in Kenya. I've seen the numbers over and over and over again. But sports seems to me, and I would say youth, high school, college, and pro all are places that I think it is extremely nearsighted, short-sighted to give up on. Like I, I, I don't know. To me, if I was going to say, okay, there's 300 people now on the street, 50-ish of them are sports people. Like, can we take 20 of them, some mix of editors, columnists, reporters? Can we put something together that's called like the DMV or what? You know what I mean? Like, can we put something together that it's just, or even if it's like a co-op or a collective that's on Substack or Beehive or whatever, can we put them together? Because like I'll give you one example. Neil, do you know Neil Greenberg? Do you know that name?
I know the name. Yeah.
So Neil is a guy who I always describe him as kind of like Nate Silver for sports. Now I know Nate does sports too, but like Neil
Yes.
is like, a data guy, a markets guy, a models guy. He's doing like expected goals for the Washington Capitals, and the commander should have gotten rid of this kicker because his make rate was below this average. Stuff that the internet loves. That guy, now I've already told him start a Substack, which he has. It's called Fancy Stats. Go follow it. There's nothing on it yet, but he's good. But you take that guy, you take a prominent columnist, you take a Commanders reporter, you take a Wizards reporter, you take a Nationals reporter, two Commanders reporters. That's six people. I feel like you could make money on that. Now, maybe their calculation was it's too big. We have 50, they all make X
Yeah.
amount of money. We got to pay for their travel to every Nationals game. We got to pay for their health care. We got, I mean, that's to me the general problem with all these places. They're just too big. I mean, I hate to say it, they're just too big. Like
Yeah.
CNN, the amount of money CNN spends just on logistics, like getting the sat truck, getting the camera guy, getting the producer. That's not even the money for the talent person and like all the. It's just I know how you and I can make money and make a living. I don't know how they do. So what I would do is I would look at sports. If I was an entrepreneur, I would look at sports and be like, DC is a sports crazy city, especially for the Commanders and for high school basketball. Can we, because it's such a fount of high school basketball talent,
Yeah.
can we find something that fits in there that is smaller, that has a smaller footprint, that has way less overhead? And can we do that? Because then, I think that there's money there. I don't understand. I don't totally get, I wish they would explain their logic better. They're basically
Yeah.
like, we're
Yeah.
streamlining it to deal with market insufficiencies or whatever. Like, I don't know what that means. That's the one I didn't get the most. I'm glad you mentioned it.
Yes. And it also, this new conception should probably rely on less the lyrical writing, the written word,
Yep.
and more on numbers and scoops and
Yep.
quick hits. But there's a lot of opportunity to get a lot of scoops with high school basketball. It doesn't have the gatekeepers. If you know where all the kids are committing to, or really where the coaches are,
Yep.
or the UAA. But you could get, if you wanted to, you could get in deep with the UAA locals. And then, you do have people who will pay for that. People are crazy about that. They will pay for that. I
Dude,
agree with you.
I
I
pay
th-
for Top Drawer Soccer, which is a site that reports on college commitments, because my kid is a junior who wants to play soccer in college. I don't even know what
yes.
I pay, but I pay for that. I don't know that it's reporting. It's like aggregation, but I don't see why you
Yeah.
couldn't do that.
The other thing I'd say about the Post is that I just tweeted this, that this is a fact. It's not the most or even the 10th most important fact, but they had a huge national competitor, the New York Times, and the New York Times didn't make perfect decisions, but they consistently
Yep.
made better decisions than the Post. They ate the Post for lunch. The Post was never equal to the New York Times, but trying to get up there. And then the Post, like you said, declined to sign all these other outlets that could be ancillary sources of revenue when the public stopped being so dedicated to always reading the news about an administration. The Post, people stopped as much, and then Wordle lifts all boats, right?
Yep.
I wouldn't have thought that the New York Times is a Wordle delivery system that happens to give you some scoops. But if you look at their fundamentals, Wordle and float the New York Times during these tough times. And the Post had nothing like that. I'll also add that I have friends there, the Post's podcasting never really popped. And it's hard to pop, but the New York Times did.
Yep.
There are a few places that have the potential to have podcasts that really go somewhere and pop. I think the quality of some, I have friends who had or have podcasts for the Post, and the Post Opinion podcast I like a lot. But yeah, they never really were able to do it, compare themselves to the New York Times. And then it becomes impossible, because I was just listening to the Daily today, and Eric Wemple was talking as a New York Times reporter, analyzing what happened with the Post. And of course, it had to be said, well, Wemple, you were a Post reporter. And he's
Yep.
like, yeah. And one day my wife was like, you've got to get out of this sinking ship. And at some point, he referenced, perhaps directly or obliquely, a couple Pulitzers that they won. This is how great the Post was. And I said, oh, Eli Saslow, he's with the Times.
Yep.
Oh, he said the New York Times, the Washington Post had all these great scoops about Donald Trump's charities. I'm like, oh yeah, Fahrenhold,
He's
at
at
the
the
Times. Everyone
Times.
you're
Yep.
citing.
Yep.
Yeah, everyone you're citing as having these Pulitzer-winning scoops. Not everyone, not Tom Hamburger, but most of them have been scooped up by the Times. And this wasn't what made this was a symptom, not the cause of the of the Post sinking, but that is what happened. Also, another thing I did, I was on the Pulitzer site. So one of the things that Wemple said was they won the Pulitzer along with the Times for their breaking coverage of the Russia connection. And I went, and it was just given to the staffs of each paper.
Yep.
And I went and I started looking at the specific articles that were submitted. So these were the Pulitzer winning articles. A lot of them are pretty embarrassing. There's one that says, although not paid, Christopher Steele has the confidence of the FBI. And maybe that accurately described the mindset or the mindset of those in the Bureau who are leaking, but it does not stand up to scrutiny over time. And a lot of the other stories were about connections and Jeff Sessions talking with the Russians beforehand, things that didn't add up to the scandal that they thought they did. And in fact, have you been following this? Trump is actually winning lawsuits in Florida. He's suing the Pulitzers for
I knew he
standing
was
by
suing.
the award that they gave. He's not. He's winning in Florida, or at least he still has standing. No court says he doesn't have standing. And it's an odd thing because first he criticized the award itself. And the Pulitzers then issued a strong declaration standing by them. It was that declaration that Trump says has elements of untruth to it that he's suing over. And the court said this lawsuit can go ahead. But yeah, if you look at those stories, the some high watermark in what was driving Post coverage was the idea that there was this Russian connection, which really, it definitely didn't exist as much as the Post coverage would have you believe. But then again, I'll emphasize, they shared that with the New York Times, and we're using the New York Times as an example of a news entity that gets it. So
Well,
can't have been the reason.
one
Yeah.
last thing on media, and then we'll move on and do more politics. The only thing I always like to say is because people point at the Times all the time, like, well, if the New York Times can do it, I don't see why other places can't do it. Here's what I'll say about the New York Times. Look, I think that people like Peter Baker,